Happy Friday. John Lorden here with your weekly episode of BrainScratch. We have another case to look into today, but before we get started with that, I wanted to let you guys know about an article that was written that I'm pretty touched by, and I hope you guys will take a few minutes to check out. It's essentially about true crime as entertainment, and quite specifically, how do I fit into that? Very well written. I really appreciate them taking the time to put the research and effort into this. So I hope that you guys will check the description box below, find that link, and give it a read. It really raised some interesting questions even inside of me in terms of the content that I produce and the focus of that content, and of course, the intent. I think it might do the same for you. So please take a look. All right, today's BrainScratch really boils down to one question. Let me run a little video segment for you, and then I'll let you know what that question is.
I'm happy that we found it, because I'm hoping that it'll give us some clues on where she might be. I don't know what to think. I mean, it's just at first it scares me because it's here. And I didn't know if we'd find it.
So that was Brad Dunlap, and he's talking about his wife being missing. Do you think that Brad is aware that his wife is actually in the trunk of the car that is right behind him during this interview? This interview is quite a bit longer. I'll have a link to it down below as well. It does come from another YouTube posting, but they've left it as unlisted, so you can't search for it. So be sure to hit the description box below, and you can watch the full 8 minutes of his interview and try to decide for yourself. Is this man really involved in his wife's death? Unfortunately, that is what we're looking at here. It doesn't remain a missing persons case long at all. Within a matter of an hour of when that interview happens, they make the discovery of her body. Or are police so focused on him that they're missing something else? And an interesting component to all this is her parents and Dunlap, the victim, her parents at the time were supportive of Brad and thought he had nothing to do with it. And now we're talking over 2 decades later, they still support him. They're still in touch with him. They visit each other. He comes to see Anne's grave every single year. I don't know, guys. There's a lot to try to dissect with this case, and I'm not sure which way it really leans. Is he the suspect and the police just couldn't put the case together? Or is there something else going on here? But let's get into the details and see what we can learn together. So this is a photo of our victim, Anne, and this picture was actually the last picture taken. It is of her at a restaurant with some friends where they were having brunch. That's part of the timeline. We'll get into the timeline here fairly quickly, but you've already seen him in the video clip. Here is Brad and his wife, Anne. They were together for approximately 11 years total, 3 years that they were dating, and then they were married for an additional 8 years. They were living together at her parents' house because they had just bought a property and they were building a new house on that property. Now for this one, this case takes place in 1995. There's not a ton of media available for it online. There is some, and there's some recent developments that I think are pretty interesting. We're definitely going to touch on all that. So I'll be using some newspaper clippings to kind of help drive the conversation here as well. But let's let you know where this takes place. This takes place in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And in case you're not familiar, Minneapolis is the largest city in the state of Minnesota and the 46th largest in the United States. It has an estimated population of 425,000 people. And it's part of a greater metro area, the Twin Cities, you might have heard to it being referred to as. It's kind of partnered up with St. Paul, which is considered the other Twin City. And around that whole metro area, you're talking over 3.5 million people that live there. Minneapolis is a place I go to on occasion. For me, it's a place for great music venues, great restaurants, great breweries. But unfortunately for a family, it's the place where their daughter loses her life and they find her in the trunk of her own car. It always disturbs me to know that people are being mishandled in that way. And for this case in particular, there's some interesting things about where the car is found. But let's get started with a clip over at newspapers.com. This is from the Star Tribune, which is a local paper, and it was published on the 14th of January, 1996. What they've done here is basically put together a timeline of the events. So Ann Barber Dunlap is in her early 30s at this point. She's a bit of an avid runner. She also works for Pillsbury, has recently been promoted. Seems like she's on a pretty good track in life. I mean, her and her husband are essentially building their dream home. Her parents say she is very meticulous, very detailed, and when it came to their relationship, that sometimes she would maybe drive what was happening and get her way a lot of the time. And as a matter of fact, most of the plans for the house that were being built seemed to really be Ann driving all of that stuff. But let's get to the timeline here at the Star Tribune. Saturday, December 30th. In the morning, Ann Barber Dunlap runs with her running group and then later meets up for brunch. And she leaves for home sometime before 2 p.m. At 2:30 p.m., she's last seen at her parents' home. Her husband, Brad Dunlap, says she told him that she was going to the Mall of America to buy a pair of shoes, and she'd meet him at the house between 5:30 and 6 p.m. to go to dinner. In the meantime, Dunlap said he runs errands. Now, one little discrepancy I'm seeing is this time frame about when they're supposed to meet up for dinner. In most of the articles I'm seeing, even later ones from the Star Tribune, the time frame that Brad said was actually 4:30. That they were supposed to be meeting up for dinner. So I don't know why it's listed as between 5:30 and 6 here. That kind of makes more sense logically to me. It just seems like 4:30 is a little early for dinner, but just to note, in most of the things I'm reading, it does seem like the time frame is 4:30. So by 6 p.m., she has not arrived. At 8 p.m., he calls his in-laws, Dawn and Louise Barber. They are not at the home that all four of them live at together right now. They're actually at a cabin. They decide that they're going to head home. At 10 p.m., the Barbers drive the same route that Brad Dunlap tells them he thinks his wife would have driven to the mall, and they search for their daughter's car in parking lots and ramps. They don't find it. They drive to Southdale Shopping Center in Edina and comb that parking lot. Brad Dunlap remains at the Barber house, calling hospitals, Mall of America security, Minneapolis police, Bloomington police, and the State Patrol every half hour. And just in case you're not familiar, the Mall of America is a giant mall. I think for right around the time that it was opened, I think it was the largest mall in the U.S. It might not have that title anymore, but it's so big that essentially there's a theme park smack in the middle of the mall. If I remember right, it's at least 4 stories and they're giant, and there's just a ton of businesses there. Certainly a place that you would go to if you wanted to go and do some shopping. Sunday, December 31st, 1 a.m., Brad Dunlap, on the advice of Louise Barber, drives to the Medina property. Actually, I think it's pronounced Medina out here, where the couple was building a home. He calls his mother-in-law to say that she is not there. So they're just trying to check, they know that could be another location that maybe she had gone to. I don't know the state of construction that it's in at this point. Maybe she went out there to check on something and there was some type of accident. Maybe that's what they were concerned about. But he goes out to check on her there and does not find her there. Around 7:40 a.m., Brad Dunlap calls Minneapolis police to file a missing person report. I am told that when he initially tries to file it, I think he's told that he has to wait for 48 hours. That story we hear all the time. But I don't know if that's actually the case, because it does seem like, if nothing else, they put out an all points bulletin to actually try to find her vehicle. January 1st, 7:20 a.m., he organizes friends to distribute posters. At 8 a.m., one of the groups finds Ann Dunlap's car at the K-Mart at 10th West Lake Street in Minneapolis, and they call the others, including Brad. They run several blocks to a Perkins where they see police cars. They alert the officers, who follow them back to the lot. Officers tell everyone to stay away from the car. No one opens the trunk. the keys are in the unlocked car. So certainly a big cause for concern there. 10 a.m. to 10:30, bloodhounds arrive and sniff towards the back of the K-Mart. Police tow the car to a police forensic garage, and then at 11:15 a.m. the trunk is opened and her body is discovered. Now, it's kind of interesting because, of course, on the first season of 3 Men and a Mystery, we covered a case where 2 teenagers were found in the trunk of a car. In that case, the officers that found the vehicle thought that it was strange the way they found the car, and they decided to open the trunk on the spot, and they made the discovery there. Here, things are handled a little differently. I'm not quite sure why the trunk wasn't opened. From 4 to 4:30 p.m., homicide investigators questioned Brad for about 5 hours. You know, cases like this, I think it's a pretty normal step for the significant others to be questioned in this way, and that certainly happens here. By 10 p.m., he's returning to his in-laws' home and tells them that Anne is dead and that the police suspect him as the killer. The police arrive and they actually search the Barber property. On January 4th, police search the Barber home again. And on January 5th through the 7th, they ask for the public's help in identifying a 1-liter bottle of water found in her car. More than 100 calls come in. So this is a little interesting because there's some things that he says in that video where he's already noticed that there is a bottle of water in the car. He says it was kind of normal for her to have stuff like that. She's a runner. I can tell you, I was a runner for a period of years. You'd find bottles all over the place that I was leaving all over the place as well. But this bottle has a particular aspect to it that's interesting. The price label on it, first of all, there's a price label, which this is 1995, and I know that was a while ago, but, you know, barcode scanning was already in full effect, and price labels were starting to kind of phase out. Apparently, this bottle of water cost $1.69, but the price label was missing the period, so it was priced as $169. So pretty unique in terms of the pricing, and it probably would have created, you know, they don't set the price for each one item and then just tag it once. So there was probably a bunch of bottles that were mislabeled in that way, and that's effectively what they put out to the public to try to figure out where did this bottle come from. Another interesting point that Brad raises in that video is she would never shop at that Kmart. It's not in a great part of town, and it just wasn't her type of place to go. So he already found it strange that her vehicle would be found at that particular location. And some analysts that have looked into this case, they think that there might have been a reason for that. They think that the murderer might have left the car there with the keys in the ignition in an effort to get the car stolen. So then someone else could be found with the car and the body, and then they would likely become the number one suspect. January 6th, her running group leads 237 runners in a memorial run. Her funeral is held. January 9th, police say they found the store where they believe the bottle was purchased. They refused to name it. We're going to get the name of it as we go through this. January 11th, an investigator hired by Dunlap's attorney to search for clues says he's found a number of people who can place her at the mall on December 30th. One person, he says, remembers having a conversation with her about building a house. Another remembers the shoes that she was wearing. Police indicate that they have no solid evidence that could put her at the mall for a proven fact. And that's an interesting point. If there's no sales receipts or credit card charges that they could tie to actually put her at the mall, then we're opening up the window of opportunity that if this is indeed her husband's involvement, or actually anybody else, if she didn't go to the mall, the time frame for when this could have happened gets a little bit wider. So it is interesting to me that, you know, we've got an investigator that's basically hired by the attorney representing Brad that's saying, oh yeah, I talked to people and they said they saw her, but the police are holding firm. We've got no solid evidence that actually puts her at the mall that day. So it does leave that time frame kind of in the loop. We know that around 2:30 she's at home and she's basically saying she's going out to the mall. So it's really a question of, did she actually leave at that point or not? Now, one of the big problems we have here is where the car would be found. This is effectively about the area. This is Lake Calhoun, and this is where her family's home was. This area marked over here, just 1.7 miles away, is the K-Mart. Now, an interesting aspect to this is 1.7 miles, especially for someone that's a runner, and I believe Brad is also a runner as well. 1.7 miles, that's not a whole lot, and a runner could do that really relatively quickly. Even just kind of a moderate runner would probably be able to do that in about 15 or 20 minutes. So, and if he's particularly fast, it could be even a way shorter window than that. So this is troubling because we've got the car located so close to where her family was living. In terms of where the Mall of America is, it's about 10 miles south of here. So to think that she swung out to the Mall of America, maybe she was on her way home and something happened to her around there. That's still another possibility. I don't think we could really rule that out. But in terms of trying to build up a case, looking at the husband, location of the car being that close to the home, certainly a cause for concern. Now, why were the police so focused on Brad? Well, according to the Star Tribune, there was an affidavit that was filed by Sergeant David Voss. He had primary responsibility for the investigation, and it said that Dunlap's conduct during a videotaped interview on January 1st, 1996, made him a suspect in the homicide. So effectively, something happened in that conversation where Sergeant Voss decided this is our guy. It's good to know that it's videotaped. Videotape has not been released. No transcript has been released. It's interesting that so much information in the media is focusing so strongly at Brad. I mean, if the police really wanted to push the public in that way, I think they could probably just release a quote or two from that actual interrogation or interview, and that might push public perception even harder. But that doesn't seem to happen. So it makes me wonder about this as well. And you have to wonder in a case like this, is the investigator getting tunnel vision? We're going to run into some information by the end of this where I think you're going to be able to make up your own mind about that, or maybe you'll at least get a better understanding of why they were looking in that direction so hard. Here's another thing that happens. This is from the Winona Daily News. Blood matches Ann Dunlap's. Testing has confirmed that blood consistent with that of murder victim Ann Dunlap was found at her parents' home where she and her husband were living at the time of her death, police said Tuesday. This is the third search warrant served at the home. Dunlap's blood was found during an earlier search there. Dunlap, 31, a marathon runner and Pillsbury marketing manager, was found slain in the trunk of her car on New Year's Day. She died of multiple stab wounds and cuts to her head. So finding blood from the victim at the home that they're living at, I don't think that's exactly a magic bullet for solving this case. There's all kinds of reasons why her blood might have been there. It is in the garage, which is a little strange. From what I see, there's at least 3 separate instances of blood that's found in the garage. It's not found in any particular way where it looks like an attack might have happened in there. I mean, they're not talking about spray patterns on the ceiling or something like that. They're talking about pools of blood. I don't even know how big they are, but they're saying it just seemed kind of like drips, like dripping blood would cause these pools. And I don't believe that they were very large. I think they're talking about a pretty small amount. When the information about this blood being found in the garage first came out, and there was one sample from the door between the garage and the house, the police actually took the whole door. Her family was very clear about the fact that both of them within the previous week, both of her parents had injured themselves, and it could have been their blood. But this article is being very conclusive. The blood is actually matching Anne. So, like I said, not a magic bullet because it could have been from some other instance, but we do have blood found matching Anne in the garage. Now, there's another aspect to the story. They start looking into Brad's timeline, and apparently he's not exactly kind of upfront with them about what his timeline is, or the details of it are kind of slipping around a little bit. So they start doing their investigative work to try to figure out his timeline. He told the police that he went to a tropical fish shop. Apparently they have some saltwater fish and he needed supplies. He said when he went there, the shop was closed. Now, he says that he did that in that time period where she was supposedly going to buy her shoes at Nordstrom, somewhere in that 2:30 to 5 time period. But they did their research. They went and talked to people at the tropical fish shop, and they said, you know what, we're open on that day. So why he said we were closed during that particular time frame, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The owner told the Star Tribune that his store was open from 11 until 5 that day and that Brad never came in. He said that he knew the couple and that they had come in about every 3 or 4 weeks. They usually came in together. The owner and his assistant said they cannot recall Brad ever coming in alone. This is another thing that Brad mentions in the full version of the video. Just that he thought he was going to kind of help her, that he knew that this was an errand that they would have to do. And since she was going to go do that, he was going to go take care of this. So it just kind of puts into question what's going on with this time frame. If he does actually, if he's not lying, if he did try to go to the store, he didn't get there before 5 p.m. So if he got there after 5 p.m., we now still have this window of somewhere between 2:30 and 5, a couple hours here, where his time isn't exactly being accounted for. And I think that's part of what's challenging about this case. It's too bad this wasn't kind of a more modern case and we didn't have cell phones strapped on all these people so we could actually trace their movements. But unfortunately, we're talking about 1995 right into 1996 here, and that just was not available. So remember that bottle that they were trying to track down? It turns out they do find the store. It's called Tom Thumb, and it's in an area called Plymouth. Let's jump to a map real quick just so I can kind of show you these locations and how they're kind of interesting to me. So we have the K-Mart, we have the home location here at Lake Calhoun. From there, if we continue up to Plymouth, this is also, I believe, where the tropical fish store is. So it looks to me, just eyeballing it, it's probably 11 or 12 miles away from where they're living. This address, County Road 101 and Highway 55, I believe this is where the Tom Thumb was. Unfortunately, they're not open anymore, and I couldn't really find solid information, but I believe this is where it was. Now, what's interesting about that is just a little bit past that is the town where they're building their house together. So it seems like if we believe him, he's kind of heading in the direction that day to where his house is, or at least going halfway there for materials for their fish tank, and then he's going to turn around. Is that the closest location for tropical fish supplies? I don't know. And it's, we're too many years past to do a good search on that to really try to wrap that up. But it's kind of weird to me that we're putting together a line. Even if we removed the final location of the town where they're building their house, we're putting together a line that's essentially pointing us in that direction. But what do they learn when they do find the store? Minneapolis homicide investigators interviewed the store clerk in late January, and he reviewed with them videotape from a surveillance camera showing a man whom he believed was Dunlap. He said he also identified Dunlap from a police photo lineup as the man in the store that night. The tape showed the man whom the clerk believed to be Dunlap walking to the cooler where the Chippewa Springs water was kept. That's the same brand as the bottle that's found in the car. Then walking back to the front counter, he told the newspaper. On January 1st, Ann Dunlap's body and a water bottle were found in the car in a parking lot of a K-Mart in South Minneapolis. A really important detail that I'm not able to find here at all is what vehicle was Brad driving? We really have no understanding of what's going on with cars. Was there another vehicle at the house? Like, did her parents have an extra vehicle that was still at the house while they were off at the cabin as well? There's just no detail at all coming out about that. And along those same lines, for as much as we're kind of hearing about the investigation and, hey, there's blood found in the garage, we're not hearing about any forensic evidence that's really being captured from the car. And that's kind of troublesome to me. Like, if we're thinking about a situation where this is not Brad, that car is the holy grail for trying to solve this case. There should be fingerprints on the door, fingerprints on the steering wheel. I don't know if it's a automatic or a manual transmission, but either way, you've got to touch a shifter to put it into gear. There should be some type of physical evidence that's going on in that car. The one thing that's interesting about the inside of the car is there's no blood in it. We're talking a murder with multiple stab wounds. We're talking a lot of blood, a lot of opportunity for transference of that blood. But somehow we're to believe that this perpetrator murdered this woman, put her in the trunk, didn't transfer any blood onto himself, and then carry that into the interior of the car when he went to drive it to this Kmart. Some experts are saying that might actually point to a level of planning in this, where the person committed the act, changed their clothes or got rid of their clothes or cleaned up their clothes somehow, and then got into the vehicle. And to do all that, you really have to consider the person's probably at a location where they feel fairly safe. Once again, this analysis is certainly making this case look one direction, but let's continue. Another article from the Star Tribune. Police have focused on the relationship between Anne, who was 31, and Brad, who was 32. Friends and relatives have described it as a storybook marriage. In fact, the couple had received ongoing counseling over a period of years, according to Brad Dunlap's former business partner, a woman who said she knew everything about him. And that's something about the media around this. There's all these kind of insinuations, like even that last sentence. Doesn't that sound to you guys like, they're trying to kind of wink with, hey, this woman says she knew everything about him. I've read other articles that go more in depth into an interview with her and all the information that she had. From those interviews, at least, I'm not getting any sense that there was anything more to that. It just seemed like it was a close relationship, that they were, close work partners. And I don't know that that necessarily means that there was something more going on there. Maybe there was, but once again, we're just kind of getting this information from the media where it's like, hey, doesn't it look like this? And I'm not seeing information from the police that really kind of supports that. But even her parents were saying the same thing. Oh, they just had this wonderful relationship. We never saw any problems. It seems like they were actually receiving some type of counseling. Brad's story to this business partner of his was actually more along the lines that Anne was receiving counseling. And every now and then Brad would go in with her. I don't know if that's true, if it was more focused kind of on Anne and it was some type of personal counseling that Brad was assisting with, or if it was indeed couples counseling. That's just the level of detail that I got from it. Now, around all this, another reason why police are probably so focused in his direction, he had a life insurance policy. Now, they had life insurance policies already drawn up on each other for about $100,000, and they increased them to $1 million. But they both did it. So he had a policy on himself as well that was increased to $1 million. Apparently, he was in the business of selling insurance policies at one point. I think when this was going down, he wasn't actually in sales at the same time, though he might have still had his license to do so. Now, I believe he actually works for a staffing company that helps staff people in the insurance industry. And I don't know if he works for it or if he actually owns it. But so it just, it kind of makes you wonder when you've got someone that is working around the insurance industry like that, all of a sudden they increase the insurance policy and then their significant other passes away. Now that causes some interesting ripples with this case. What happens is the company that issued it, I believe they're called Chubb's Insurance, decides they don't want to pay this guy the $1 million. Anne also has another policy from her employer, from Pillsbury. Pillsbury, that policy is somewhere around the $700,000 range. So we're talking about a large sum of money. For both the policies, Brad is the sole beneficiary. So Chubb's basically has some lines in their contract that say if you are the kind of like the main suspect of killing the person, then you are not able to collect on this policy. Brad's lawyers say, well, what's making you guys think that? And Chubb says, well, we've been given this information from the police. Brad's lawyer says, well, then give us that information. We need to see that for ourselves. So this kind of starts up a little legal battle over what's going on with these records. With the police sharing those records with Chubb's, they've now effectively kind of made those records public. So eventually, Brad's lawyers do get those records. And what's really interesting is there's a recent development as of only last month that is yet another repercussion of that step. Now, if he is really the guy that did this, first of all, staying close to the family might make some sense. Trying to get access to investigative files might make some sense. Maybe he wants to know where the investigation's going, see if he could try to head off any investigation tactics that might be going on. But there's kind of another side effect to this that we're going to get to. Brad actually winds up suing to collect his wife's $1 million insurance. And it's through this lawsuit that all of a sudden this documentation does get provided to Brad's legal team and effectively Brad himself. This doesn't go to a full-blown trial from what I understand. They actually settle outside of court on this. I've seen things that say they don't know what the amount is, and I've seen other things that said it was about $600,000. So somewhere in there. I don't think there's any pushback in terms of the life insurance that was issued through Pillsbury. If the $600,000 number is right, we're talking about this guy bringing in well over $1 million on his wife passing away. Now, I did see some reports that said he had split some of one of the policies with her family. So I just want to put that out there. I'm really doing my best to be fair about this because I know that he's being painted one very strong way in the media. But I'm really trying to stay open to the fact that there might be another possibility going on here because let's face it, how long has it been? And we don't have a conviction. We don't even have them actually filing charges in this case. So something is either wrong with the focus they've got, or this guy, if he is the right guy, he's just a mastermind that was able to dupe everybody. And that's why I'm including that video. That's why I really want you guys to watch it and just try to get a sense for yourself about what's going on here. I know how a lot of this information is pointing, and I don't want to defend someone that might be responsible for a level of domestic violence. I don't want to defend anyone for being at any level of domestic violence, but certainly not for taking things to this level. But I do think that remaining fair in a case like this is important, and we're going to touch on that a little bit more as we roll forward with this too. But jumping to an article over at crookstontimes.com, Minneapolis police reopen 1996 cold case after tip on Dunlap. And this is May 20th, 2013. We're talking like 17 years after. The information that we received stems from a conversation that Brad had years earlier, way before this murder occurred. Minneapolis police spokeswoman Cindy Barrington told KARE-TV. It is significant information of a prior conversation from Brad Dunlap that led us to reopening this case. So once again, I mean, they're not telling us what the tip is, but it's pretty clear where the focus of this investigation is and that this tip does apply to Brad directly. Despite that, it seems that police are now at least wanting to put out that they're remaining objective. No one was ever charged with the murder. Police have long considered Dunlap the prime suspect, but Barrington said she didn't want to label one person as a suspect. The investigators that have been assigned to it were not on the homicide unit back in '96, she said, so it is a fresh set of eyes on the case, and they have been told to start at page 1. That's interesting because you've got this tip that's coming in that you're saying, hey, this is tied to Brad. So I don't know. Now in Arizona, Brad Dunlap has remarried and has 2 children. Over at Channel 4 WCCO, we get a little more detail in terms, well, maybe not more detail, but another perspective on this tip that's been called in. From May 16th, 2013, police say it was Brad who told the search party to go to the K-Mart parking lot on Lake Street in South Minneapolis, where they found Ann Dunlap's car with the keys in the ignition. I don't know if that's related to the actual tip, but this is the first article where I'm finding that information, and this is in 2013. But it does raise an interesting point. Now, if Brad really did tell someone that, and then he went somewhere else to search, kind of looks like that could be a decent smokescreen. But once again, we know the focus of the police. We know the focus of the investigation this whole time. And this article is only saying that the police say it was Brad who told the search party to go to the Kmart parking lot. Ann's $10,000 wedding ring and purse have never been found, but the Barbers say police didn't pursue robbery leads. They weren't trying to find out who did it. They were trying to frame him, her father, Don, said. Brad made his first 911 call at 9 p.m. On the night that she went missing. For the first time, police have released the calls. I couldn't find audio versions, unfortunately. The first call starts 911. Hi, I was hoping you could tell me the procedure of who I might call. My wife left to go shopping about 7 hours ago, and I have not heard from her since, and I was expecting her back a long time ago. The next call came at 7:30 the next morning. Dunlap made 2 more calls to police precincts that day and was told he would have to wait 48 hours to file a missing persons report. In 2005, Minneapolis Police Homicide Commander Lee Edwards said, "We are still looking at him, Brad, as the only suspect. The current head of homicide sees it differently." Lieutenant Richard Zimmerman said, "We're coming in with a fresh approach, with open minds. We don't have any preconceived notions who may have done this murder." Zimmerman was reassigned the Dunlap case because of a tip that came in. "We wish the caller had called us back in 95 or 96, but for some reason they didn't," Zimmerman said. Zimmerman would only say the new tip involves a conversation Brad had years before the murder. His investigators will be retesting evidence using new DNA tools. "I told them to start at page 1, Zimmerman said. So I appreciate that they say they're trying to kind of remain open in this case, but considering the fact that it was a tip that prompted them to reopen the investigation and the tip is specifically about Brad, I just don't know if that's really an accurate statement that they're able to remain kind of open in that way. But let's continue with an article at minnesota.cbslocal.com. 20 years have passed. Anne's parents still wait for answers. Don and Louise Barber wrestle with the fact their daughter's killer has not been found. "It gets a lot better, but you never really get over it," Don Barber said. The other terrible aspect to this is while everyone is celebrating New Year's Eve and going into a new year, every single time that comes up, Don and Louise are thinking about losing their daughter, and I feel terrible for them. "I still wake up in the night dreaming, not dreaming, thinking of what happened and how she felt at that horrible time," Louise Barber said. Almost immediately, Brad became a suspect. The Barbers have stood behind their son-in-law since day one, and they'd like to see him exonerated. "He was more broken up than we were even," Don Barber said. Pretty interesting comment, and kind of makes you wonder just a little bit, how could he be more broken up than them? I mean, this is your daughter. Does that mean that he's kind of laying it on too thick when they're around? Or could it be that he's having an emotional reaction to something else, like being worried that he's going to be discovered if he actually is the culprit? Just kind of an interesting statement from her father. "And I consider it a double whammy. We lost Anne, and we ended up losing Brad in a sense that he had to leave," Louise said. "The Barbers will never give up hope that advances in DNA will provide answers or that somebody with information will come forward." And Louise just wants to stress that if anyone out there knows anything, say something. There must be somebody out there that knows what happened. And of course, if you're that person, we have contact information in the description box below. So I found this article at NPR News, which actually refers to this case a little bit too, and the title of the article really grabbed me. "Media Suspend Ethics Guidelines in Pursuit of Killers." And I think for this case, it's hard to not have that consideration, and I can see why this case actually got written about in this article. Former WCCO reporter Carolyn Lowe, a legend in Twin Cities crime reporting, was the lead journalist in these parts in the 1995 disappearance and murder of Anne Dunlap. Local news organizations, including NPR News, so at least, he's saying, hey, we were part of this too, all but declared her husband, Brad Dunlap, the killer. Maybe he was. One problem, he was never charged. There's the neighbor of the Wetterling family, Daniel Rassier. Police dug up his yard looking for Jacob Wetterling. News media named him the suspect. The message was clear from every story to the next. He did it. They just can't prove it. He didn't do it. Ryan Larson, wrongly named by Cold Spring authorities as the killer of Officer Tom Decker, a charge amplified by local media who suspended their obligation to consider that maybe he didn't. He didn't. So I do think it's important that we remember this as we're looking into all these cases. Sometimes, and especially because of the format I'm using, I'm showing you guys what media is saying about these cases. And then I'm trying to go from that into a place of, are there other considerations that I can bring into this conversation here? But really, the media's perspective is driving a lot of the point of view that we're looking at here on the channel. So this case is a really good reminder for me that despite how things look, sometimes you do have to remain open to other possibilities. And that's why, yes, I know we've got a lot of indicators that there might be something going on here, but I do think we still have to stay open to other possibilities. And I'm worried that the investigation that has gone on, the initial investigation here, got so focused on one track that they kind of missed some other stuff around that. Wouldn't it be a very strong statement for Minneapolis PD to say, hey, we checked the inside of that car and forensically, there is nothing in there except for traces of Brad and traces of Ann? That would be a fairly strong statement. Still not foolproof. I mean, you could say that the person was wearing gloves, wearing a mask, completely covered up, and carried everything out with them. But I still think that would be a strong statement. We're not really hearing a level of detail that's making me comfortable that all those avenues have been exhausted. We are hearing some compelling points that are pointing to Brad, no doubt. But obviously not enough to make a conviction here. So if it's not enough to convict, is it fair for the media to have convicted him? So now we get to news that has just been released over the past month. This is from KARE Channel 11 out here in the Twin Cities. New details revealed. February 13th, 2020 is when this was published. KARE 11 Investigates has obtained previously undisclosed records. Those records include FBI analysis of the case, police crime scene reports, and DNA testing on a possible murder weapon. And a very interesting twist when it comes to that murder weapon. Let's go ahead and get into some of these details here. They're part of a decades-old lawsuit in which a life insurance company argued it should not have to pay Ann Dunlap's husband. So remember I told you there was kind of an unforeseen consequence there? Well, here it is. Because of that lawsuit, all the things that were entered into evidence for that lawsuit became a record in the courts. And at some point, they were still closed records. But after this many years, all of a sudden those records automatically open, and that's what happened. Police, even at the end of this article, they're kind of saying, hey, Minneapolis PD isn't really thrilled that these records were open that way. But this is yet another side effect of, they passed those records over to this insurance company because, the insurance company was seeing if they should pay this guy or not. That put the records in this state of, hey, they've been released in this direction, then they should be released in that direction. That put the records in this state of, sure, it's a closed case for now, but after a number of years, that's going to expire and this is going to open up. And that puts us in this point of having this conversation about why are police looking at Brad so strongly, and now we've got even better detail to try to understand why. The first point they raise is once again about Sergeant David Voss. They say in his affidavit that Voss called Brad Dunlap the only plausible suspect and claimed his motive was to cash in on the life insurance benefits. Voss wrote that he suspected Dunlap from the day police first interviewed him. It was Mr. Dunlap's conduct during this videotaped interview which prompted me to consider him a suspect in the homicide, Voss said in his affidavit. So pretty much that's almost a quote from what we had in the news articles from back at the time. Once again, no additional detail about what is it about that interview. I mean, really, a couple statements. Was it a way he looked at you? I mean, just what is it? We don't have that detail. This is a picture of Sergeant Voss actually talking to Brad at the scene there. So in the video of Brad that we started today's episode with, there's also mention in there of the fact that he's talking to FBI agents. These documents confirm that. The FBI was brought in to assist with the investigation. FBI agents called Brad Dunlap a viable suspect, saying the crime must have been committed by someone who knew the victim very well and staged the scene. One of the points about knowing the victim well is effectively there's no defensive wounds found on Ann. So they're thinking that she must have been very comfortable around this person when the attack at least initiated. But then once the attack started, why wouldn't there have been some defensive wounds after that? We're talking multiple stab wounds, and they're saying that this guy wasn't exactly a very skilled killer. In the notes, they also say that they consider it overkill, that what he had done to this person was just much more than was actually needed. The notes also specify that they don't think that she died until she was actually in the trunk. But then the notes are also there's kind of two perspectives, because they have Brad's experts that are in part of these notes as well, and they're calling out things like, hey, look in the garage. You've got problems with this blood analysis, because for all these different stab wounds, there should be all kinds of different blood patterns in there. We're not finding any of that. We're not finding anything that looks like it was cleaned up necessarily. So what's going on with this case? And there's a big question there about why are there no defensive wounds, but these documents are going to give us an answer. A forensic pathologist who worked with the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Unit also reviewed the autopsy report in the case. Based on the stab wounds, he concluded the killer was an intelligent and thinking individual, but an individual with no experience at killing. In a letter to an insurance company lawyer, the medical examiner wrote that the food I found in her stomach was consistent with what she'd eaten at brunch. Since the food was still in her stomach, Dr. Daniel Davis concluded Anne likely died the same day within a few hours of the brunch. Now, in the documentation, Sergeant Voss leans on that really, really hard. And they even get it down to a time window. I think it's like from 2:30 to 3:30, where they say that she must have died in this period of time. There's another expert from Brad's side, of course, that says you can't really rely on an analysis like this, that people's stomachs empty at different rates. And it's not proper to be relying on it for trying to ratchet it down to that type of time frame. I think what is fair is to consider what is Anne's normal life, what are her normal patterns and habits. If he was meeting up with her at 4:30 or 5:30 to 6 for dinner, whatever, we can assume that if she was still able to take care of herself, she wasn't being held by someone or something like that, that she would have had dinner that night. And she didn't. They're saying the things that are in her stomach were consistent with what she had ordered at the brunch with her friends. So something happened to her in that afternoon period. However, I think Sergeant Voss was really just pushing too hard on this expert is telling us it happened between 2:30 and 3:30. It makes it basically, I see why. I mean, if you've got people that are saying, hey, the last time we saw her was 2:30 and she was at the house, and if that person is Brad, and if you could prove, hey, she died at 2:30, boom, case closed. But unfortunately, this type of analysis just can't be used like that. When police searched the Minneapolis house where Brad and Anne had been living with her parents, they thought they'd found the crime scene. The human blood found, according to the BCA, was consistent with that of Anne Barber Dunlap, said Sergeant Don Smolsky. Back then, police announced they had found traces of blood in the garage. Dunlap hired private investigator Bill O'Keefe after Anne's death. He told reporters that blood found on the garage floor and the doorway wasn't necessarily Anne's. However, the newly released lab reports say DNA tests on 3 bloodstains found on the garage floor and 1 on the door matched Anne, but do not match the other family members. So very clearly, we have Anne's blood in the garage. Like I said, not exactly a magic bullet, but there's another consideration here. I'm wondering, this statement kind of pings my brain a little bit. When police searched the Minneapolis house where Brad and Anne had been living together with their parents, they thought they'd found the crime scene. I think they were relying on that pretty strongly, and I have to think that they got that wrong. I don't know that the garage is the actual crime scene. It doesn't quite seem logical, but there's another reason why they thought that. It's so weird with this case. I keep wanting to go one direction, and then I remember there's another consideration. But let's get to that here. This autopsy report details how Anne's throat was cut repeatedly. There were stab wounds on the left side, right side, and back of her neck. It just sounds like a terrible, brutal attack. There was no evidence of sexual assault. They did note that they did find semen, but it didn't look like it came from a sexual assault. And of course, we're talking about a married woman, so I think we could assume that might have been from a consensual act with her husband. No evidence of defensive wounds. Although the medical examiner found she bled to death in the trunk of the Toyota, reports say that police did not find the type of blood spatter pattern they would expect to see if she had actually been stabbed there. So that could have been a consideration, like if the car was actually pulled into the garage and she's put in the trunk and then stabbed in the trunk, you would find indicators of that. There would be blood spatter pattern analysis that they could do, and they could say, hey, look, when he's swinging the knife back, it kind of flung against the top of the hood of the trunk, and you could see the pattern there. The blood that they find, while there's a lot of it, seems very contained to the locations where she was actually bleeding from, and some transference. One of the points of transference they talk about in the documentation is actually on the bumper, which once again just really makes me surprised that at the time where they're actually out there in this picture looking at the car, no one saw, hey, what's this on the bumper here? That might be blood. Maybe we should open up this trunk, but that's definitely not what happened. And we've talked about it a little bit before, but authorities did not find any blood stains in the interior of the car. A retired FBI agent concluded the lack of blood inside the victim's vehicle is significant as it reflects planning. Because of the multiple stab wounds, Agent Greg Mccreary wrote that the killer's clothes were unquestionably drenched in blood. As a result, he could not have entered the victim's car and driven it without getting transfer blood on the inside of that vehicle. Fireplace log. What fireplace log are we talking about? These documents are the first time that we come to know this in the case, and they do answer a question of why there's no defensive wounds. The records reveal something else that's never been reported. In the garage, the police found a blood-stained fireplace log. A lab report says Ann's DNA was on that log, too. The medical examiner found evidence of a blunt force blow to her head. He concluded Ann was apparently hit with something broad and flat. So this raises a few points. Of course, if she's hit with the log first and that incapacitates her, and then she is attacked with a knife, we now know why there's no defensive wounds. But the fireplace log is found in the garage, and it has blood on it, and it's got her DNA on it. Seems to me like that's a pretty strong indicator of that item being involved with her in an unnatural way. I don't think it would be the same if it was, hey, we found blood on her razor that she uses for shaving her legs. I mean, that, there's a reasonable explanation for that. Now we're finding a piece of fireplace log that has her blood and DNA on it. Very strange, and it's found in the garage. Now, I know earlier I was saying I don't think they got the crime scene right. I don't think the log being in the garage necessarily means that the garage is where the blow took place. It could have been somewhere else. Now, we know they searched the house 3 times, so if it was somewhere in the house, they could have found it, or they should have found it. They didn't. So what else is going on with that? Was that log even from the house? Could that log have come from a completely different location? That's just kind of what I'm wondering here. There's something I'm still being bothered about with the pattern of driving that he said he had done that day, and it seeming to head out to where their house was being built. Maybe this did happen at the house. Maybe it was a thought of his that he could dump her body at that location and hide it in a way where it wouldn't be found. And then, construction comes in and pours concrete over her and it's all done. Maybe he changed his mind on the drive, said, no, that's a terrible idea because, years later they could find it. I don't know. But there's something about his movements that day, and especially with the time frame that we're talking about, where he's driving out there. His wife has been missing for 3 or 4 hours, and he's driving out to try to go to the tropical fish store that's closed. I don't know. I mean, she's already missed dinner at that point, so why are you running that errand at all? So if the attack happened in the garage as police believed, forensic experts hired by Dunlap say no evidence exists of that type of extensive bleeding. No evidence of projected blood stain patterns, impact spatter, cast-off blood stains. No evidence exists indicating that the floor of the garage was cleaned. The murder weapon used to stab Ann was never found, but there's an interesting point about it. A forensic lab report notes that a broken knife blade tip from a pocket knife was found during the autopsy. It's described as a stainless steel piece of a sheep foot blade. I didn't know what that was initially, so I've looked them up. I can see why they call it a sheep foot because of kind of the shape of the non-sharp end. But apparently part of the murder weapon is actually found on her body. We don't know where the rest of the blade is. We don't have any way to really tie this to Brad necessarily, but very important detail, because if they did have the rest of that blade, they have the tip unless it's been resharpened over and over and a new tip has been created, there's a potential match that could actually happen there. And what about that water bottle mystery? Well, sometimes clues like that seem really important and then they kind of fizzle out. Water bottle mystery. Police had asked the public for help identifying the store that sold the Chippewa Springs water bottle found in the front passenger seat of Ann's car. It had a unique price tag, which police soon traced to a Tom Thumb convenience store on Highway 55 and County Road 101 near the location of the home Brad and Ann were building. Police reports show the store's surveillance video captured an image of a man investigators thought might be Brad shortly after 6 p.m. Keep in mind, that's why we know after 6, he's out in that direction. He's at least 10 miles away from home. So them meeting up for dinner or something, he's got that all wrong. That's not working at this time frame. And it's even worse if they were supposed to meet up for dinner at 4:30, because now she's missing for a period of hours. You know she's been missing, and you decide you're going to go do these errands. That doesn't necessarily jive either. A video analyst found it to match Brad. So we've got now a professional analysis saying, yeah, that's Brad in the footage. Forensic tests done on the water bottle eventually detected Ann's DNA, but not Brad's. The records also show that police also investigated other suspects. So I don't know if that water bottle really ties into anything. The footage might be more important than the water bottle at this point, because it at least puts him out in that location. Maybe he did buy a different bottle of water. Maybe that bottle of water is in his car. Maybe it was regular for them to stop at that location on the drive for some reason. Could it be too coincidental that they would both have a water bottle from that location, possibly in 2 different cars? I don't think that's necessarily the case, especially considering that it's on the path out to where their home is. But once again, why does it seem like he's going in that direction on that day? I don't know. And yeah, I like this note at the end that the police records also show that they investigated other suspects. So maybe Voss got tunnel vision, but if nothing else, other suspects were reviewed. There was other stuff that was being considered around this. We know they're trying to remain objective and open to it as of 2013 when they reopened the case. But I don't know. I really want to thank Care 11 for putting this together. This article is pretty much what motivated me to cover this case. There's so much new detail that's come out. The unsealed documents are here. So I'm going to have this in the top of the sources link. And as a matter of fact, there's also a link to the YouTube video of Brad in this as well. So this will be right at the top of the sources. So you can come here. You can watch the full 8 minutes with Brad if you want. You can go through the documentation for yourself if you want and take a look at it. There's a couple of good conversations happening online at Reddit. This one in particular, they just have some really good, solid questions. What kind of knife was it? I think it'd be great if they could do some type of analysis. I don't know if they could analyze like maybe the type of material that the blade tip is made out of and try to trace that back to a manufacturer or the shape of it, something along those lines. But I think that's a huge and important question. What did Brad say in his 5-hour interview? I think a lot of the grief that is going in the police department's direction could really be mitigated if there was just a clear statement about, hey, he said blah, blah, blah. And that's why we're thinking about him so much. Or that's why I knew at that point that it was him. And once again, we're not getting that. And here we are. This case is over 2 decades old. We've got a family still waiting for justice that might actually be entertaining a person that's responsible for killing their daughter. I don't know why you don't put some different pieces into play at this point to try to move this case forward. What vehicles did Ann and Brad have access to? I think that's a really important question. I'm really curious why we're getting all this analysis about what Brad did that day, but we're not getting a simple answer to, yeah, he had his own truck. And, when he went to the Tom Thumb store, they noticed that it was his truck outside. I mean, something like that. It makes you feel like when you're getting kind of pieces of the conversation that your view is kind of being guided. That's kind of how I feel. Did Ann or Brad have a mobile phone, handheld or car mounted? From the information that he's putting out in that video about, him trying to call home to get her and leaving a message at home, I don't think that there was any mobile phone situations going on here. One other interesting aspect that happened through this is Pillsbury after losing an employee in this way, decided they weren't going to advertise on content that promoted violence anymore. So I would assume that meant like, television series that featured, violent action or things like that. So outside of that, there was memorial runs. There is a scholarship that is given in Anne's honor. We always try to look for the bright spots, and this is like no other case. There's certainly some bright spots where Anne is being honored, but there's just this one very dark spot in terms of someone got away with this, and that's really not fair. Paul Barber is Anne's brother. He has put together a website, and as you can see, this is a website that was put together a long time ago, 1996. It's one of the earliest websites where a family member is trying to find justice. So you might want to check that out. On top of that, there is a Facebook page called armchairinvestigator.com that is focused primarily on this case. There's also a website that coincides with that if you want to do a bit of a deeper dive. Right here, Armchair Investigator. So a lot more that you could look into, but if anything, really dive into that Care 11 article, look through those documents for yourself, watch that video. I think those are the strongest pieces of information we have about this case now, at least for us to get a good understanding of why they were focused on him so much. What solves this moving forward? That is really the big question. At this point, do they have the right man and they just don't have the right details? That's I just got this feeling that the crime scene is not right, that there's something about the crime scene. What about the bloodhounds going around to the back of the K-Mart? What's that about? That seems like they detected something of her scent that was going to the back of the store. Why would that be? She's in the trunk, so is it an item of hers that was taken? He says in his video that he brought items of hers so that the bloodhounds could, get her scent. Is there some way that he was transferring his own scent to those items and the bloodhounds were actually following a pattern of him moving to the back of the store? It occurs to me that if this is so well thought out, you've got these items you have to get rid of. You've got this knife you have to get rid of. Does that justify why you're taking a drive and you're going to drop different items along different routes in different trash bins so that they're hopefully never recovered? But if that's true, how do you leave that log behind? How does that not wind up in the fireplace and just burned immediately? I don't know. For the level of planning that is being assumed here, there are some things that just really kind of defy expectations, and I just don't know which way to go about it. But that's why I do this, and that's why I need your brains on this as well. So let's talk about this case in the comments down below. Thank you for hanging in with me on this video. I know my voice is getting a little messed up as I go along. This cold is kind of kicking in on me a little bit, but this is a case that really needs more exposure. A lot of this information is starting to disappear, so I wanted to pull it together in one place, bring another little ray of light to it, and hopefully we can help find justice for Anne and for her parents. Her parents are 85 now. Their dream is just that they have an answer to this before they're not around anymore. So if you're the person that can do that, please use the details in the description box below. Take care, everyone. Have a nice weekend. I'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked on the Lord and Arts channel.